So they might be joining us or not?
Yeah, might be.
Okay.
Okay, we're live.
We're live. Hey, Nat. I'm Rob.
Hey, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. This is episode 10. We actually counted up before the episode, so we're actually, yep. So
Can't believe we've done 10 weeks.
I know. It's flowed, actually. And tonight we're going to go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just so everybody knows, we move for people that have been in daylight savings. We've moved it forward an hour, so because Rob and I are on the same time now, and it allows me to get some sleep on a Wednesday night.
This is always good.
Okay.
So tonight, I think we're probably going to talk about a few things, but we're going to talk about hypoagency. And then there's a website in the UK. Everyone's invited. Everyone's invited, or everybody's invited. Now I've got to think.
Everyone's invited. I think.
Everyone's invited. Thank you. Yes, everyone's invited. That I think we both had a look at, and I believe there are a couple of people who might have been joining us tonight, but there may be some technical issues.
We're having a couple of technical issues, so if they can't join us, they will be commenting.
Okay, no worries at all.
So if you see me, I'm listening to everything that we're discussing, obviously. But if you see me distracted, like to the viewers, it's because I'm trying to be smart. And that doesn't necessarily always work.
So hypoagency is essentially a phenomenon where not just women, but really the entire society denies women's agency, which is basically women's ability to own their own mistakes and take responsibility for their actions and so forth. And it really is right through Western civilization and perhaps also other civilizations. We've got, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Nat?
Okay, so from what I've sort of learned with hypoagency, it's like, well, how am I going to say this with words? It's like people want their cake and to eat it too. Like, this is, we want equality. We want equality across the board. With certain stereotypes, it's like, yes, we want equality. That's what we're fighting for, but only in certain situations. So we still want men to do longer jail time for the same crime. We still want, men to open it. We still want to be treated. No, that's wrong. We still, when we go out to dinner, we still want men to pay for dinner, even though we want equality. But when we go home, I still expect the husband to do 50% of the housework and look after the kids 50% of the time. Even if I'm not in a paid job, even if I'm a home mum, it's like, they sort of want their cake to eat it as well.
Have the cake and eat it too. I think that's a good example you gave there with the judicial system. I was thinking of the same example, actually. So women are advantaged at every aspect of the judicial system. So women are less likely to be suspects. They're less likely to be arrested if they are a suspect. They're less likely to be charged if they are arrested. They're less likely to be convicted if they're charged. If they are convicted, they're less likely to be they'll receive a shorter sentence if it's a custodial sentence. So at every stage of the judicial process, women are again at an advantage. Now, feminists actually call this part of patriarchy, which is really interesting if you think about it, because it'd be a pretty dysfunctional sort of patriarchy that would let women off. In actual fact, it's part of hypoagency, because what's happening is the judges, the entire system, the men and the women in the system all think that the women couldn't have been that bad, that they need to be let off, that they're more likely to be given a second chance, and they need to be given a second chance. In fact, there was a female judge, I think it was in the UK, excuse me, recently, that actually said that that she was not going to give a custodial sentence to a woman because she was a woman. Now, it's usually not that overt. In that case, the judge is actually under investigation.
Okay, so before we go any further, we've got Not with us tonight. Not, take yourself off mute and tell the audience about yourself.
Hello, Nat. Hi, Robert.
How are you?
I am a recently woken up activist. I've been sort of roaming around on the internet and kicking up a bit of a stink for the last couple of years. Becoming increasingly concerned about how blatant the sexism is that I'm seeing. And so trying to mobilise some more serious action that will create change, involving both direct activism and legal activism. The extent to which I'll be successful at that, who knows? But it's I consider it's my duty as a dad to do everything that I can to protect kids.
Yeah, we've been watching with interest, actually, the stuff that you've been getting up to. Now, you and I, of course, have talked quite a bit online, but we haven't had a chance to meet in person yet. But I think one of these days.
Yes, I try to move in all circles and still feeling my way around and finding out who's who in the zoo.
Absolutely.
Okay, and sorry, Not, what do you think of what we've discussed so far as far as hypo agency?
I only just tuned in and I've only just joined the group, so I can't say what you've discussed because I didn't hear it. But I normally have an opinion on anything and have thought about most things. So.
Well, the next thing I think we were going to talk about was a website in the UK called Everybody's Invited, and it actually comes into what you're talking about with a lot of the sexism against men, or dare I say, misandry that we're seeing in society. So my view is that for a long time, it was quite difficult, and we could see the misandry, but a lot of people, they would deny it. Sometimes it was hard to prove because feminists were quite evasive about it. But that's all changed in the last few years. I think since about 2015, but it's getting particularly worse. And I think at this point, I don't believe it's possible for anyone who's being honest to really deny that there's a problem in society now. So I don't know if you know, Not, but Everybody's Invited, is a website in the UK which invites principally women. There have been actually a few men who have submitted testimonies too, principally women and girls, to essentially state that if there's been a sexual assault or a sexual harassment or something like that, and then basically present that anonymously. And there are, last count as of a couple of days ago, maybe it's probably more now, there were 14,000 since it all blew up. The site's been around since mid last year, but it all blew up about a week or two ago. It became very, very well known, went viral, as they say. And so it's now up to about 14,000. And both Nat and I have gone through and had a look. I've actually taken a random sampling of about 20 of them. It was actually the first 20 that I found, because the site is presenting them to you sort of randomly, as far as I know. And it's quite extraordinary. I mean, some of them, if they're true, the matter should go to the police for investigation. There are a number of women there who allege rape, for example. But there's quite a number of others where they're simply saying, in fact, one young girl suggested that her boyfriend had actually been completely respectful towards her, but she didn't like the way his friends had been talking about their relationship, and that was sort of the nature of it. But what they're reporting now is that there's a number of schools being mentioned. The site won't allow individuals to be named, but schools are being named, and some boys are now going to school in civvies and then changing into their school uniforms when they get to school, because they're being harassed on the way to school in the UK.
Yeah, that's just one part of what I see as a whole movement. that's really blowing up at the moment, and all based on covert agendas, using seemingly innocuous and reasonable language. So everybody's invited, yes, but we're only going to pay attention to some of you. Yeah, although I'm a bit of two minds about that, because I'm a big supporter of women speaking out about the wrongs that are being done to them, and in some ways I support the stuff that's happening in Australia with a whole bunch of women sort of saying enough. But on the other hand, of course, that's being hijacked and going to be manipulated as well. But what I've found is that, this is just my personal experience, but it's the victims of crime, and due to the context, we're talking mostly women, because there are no male victims of any of this. Of course, that's the official narrative. But those women tend to be the least hateful. What I've found is that it's the advocates for those women that pick up their experience and hijack it, and say, "Oh, this is something that we can piggyback on." But the people who I've talked to personally, men and women, but I'm specifically talking about the women here, they tend not to be the stereotypical feminist, hate all men, let's all make false claims type stuff.
You mean the original complainants? The original complainants, you mean? The women who
yes. I'm saying the people who have really experienced this, as opposed to the industry that rises up around them to support them. That's just my experience and my perception.
There have been a few, I suspect, where they've started out as genuine, but then they've seen the whole they get involved in the whole process and perhaps get a little bit carried away with it too.
Oh, of course, of course, yeah.
Yeah, mind you, that speaks back to hyper agency again. So so anyway, this is what we've got in the UK going on at the moment. We've just had Brower College here in Australia, where they got the boys to. We talked about that last week, where they got the boys to stand up and basically apologise to the girls. Now, I have heard there may be something similar happening in Australia in relation to everybody's invited, but I haven't been able to confirm that. But I have been told that, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. But it does seem the last few weeks have seen quite a rise in these sorts of problems, particularly circulating around schools. And
I find it, so we all know, because I swore like a trucker last week with the Brower College one. My major issue is, so part of what I saw today when everybody's invited was there was signs around these schools of teach boys. Now, I said last week, and I've said several times, it doesn't matter what you teach these people, they are still going to, like, if a rape is always going to rape. It doesn't matter whether you turn around at school and say, no, that's wrong. So a perpetrator is always going to be a perpetrator. And, you know, it's like the white ribbon thing where they had to sign the document, they had to sign the contract saying that they'd never hit a woman. But if they're going to hit a woman, they're going to hit a woman with or without that contract. It's not about a matter of teaching our boys not to rape, or it's not a matter of victim blaming. It's a simple matter, especially when it comes to, and we did an episode, I think it was our third one on consent, where when it comes to consent, we've got to teach our women to have the balls to stand up and say no. Wrong choice of words with the balls thing, but we're still treating our women like victims.
That's
and
poetic.
yeah, but we're still treating our women like victims, and we're still treating our women as if they're delicate little flowers. And it's like, yeah, because you don't have the voice to say no, they should know. Like, the men should know. I'm sorry, I don't have ESP. If I was a fly on the wall, I think she was into it. If as a woman, if I can't see that she wants to say no, how is a guy supposed to see it? How is anybody supposed to see it, regardless of gender? So it's about empowering our women to say no.
Yes. One of the fundamentals with men's rights is that we view women as equal. And that carries with it rights as well as responsibilities as well as rights. So absolutely. One of the key aspects is that all adults should adult. And that means taking responsibility for one's actions.
It's never going to, I'm sorry, I just can't put words together because I'm still so angry about the Broward College one. It's about teaching us to, as you said, teaching us to be adults and be responsible. Whether it's right or wrong, people who are going to break the law, like, it's like banning all guns. A criminal isn't going to say, I can't do it, I can't commit that crime anymore because guns are banned, and I'm not going to break the law as far as going out and buying a gun on the black market. They're still going to do this crime. You can't turn around and say, we've got to teach our men not to do this. No, we've got to teach society. It's not a matter of teaching anything. They know it's wrong.
Well, the vast majority of men were never going to hurt women anyway.
No.
That's what they keep portraying. That's why Broward College got the boys to stand up. That's why they're doing this now. They're trying to claim that it's typical male behaviour, and it's not. And what I don't know. I don't know. It's one of the points I keep repeating. Is that men are far more likely to help women than to ever hurt women. It really goes against the grain for the vast majority of men.
And the perfect example, and I'll put myself in the situation. The perfect example was for the Red Pill premiere in Melbourne. Out of, I think it was about 125 people, 20 of them would have been women, but I was the only female that was part of the
organisers.
Yeah. So, and I had full security around me. I had guys that waited downstairs with me whilst the party was going on upstairs before the show started. To protect me. When I was walking around to where it was the cloak and dagger situation, was walking around from point A to bring the members around to point B, I had 3 guys watching me to make sure I was protected. So men will protect me more than attack me.
Yeah.
And where I live, I'm more scared to walk down my street and get attacked by a specific racial group that are prone in the area, and the females that are part of this racial group scare the crap out of me more so than the guys. That's all I'm saying. I won't say what racial group because it's not fair. It's not fair on the particular race, but this race in this area, people are scared of them left, right, and centre.
I think, Natalie, before you were talking about with the Red Pill screening, you were talking about the fact that you had to give a fake location, didn't you? And then you walked the people.
Yeah,
from the fake
so
location.
What it was, because of the first one got cancelled, we didn't let anybody know where the location was. And I think it was like 2 or 3 hours before the actual screening, we gave them a location where to meet us, and we walked groups of 10 around to the actual location at a time.
Now, these guys in Melbourne pioneered that. We're in Brisbane. We copied them a few months later and did it with our screening of the red pill. It's now used all around the world by MRAs and others, because that was pioneered right here. A lot of people don't realise that. The whole fake location, that was us.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was totally cloak and dagger. There was where it was actually screening, you wouldn't have seen it unless you knew that it was an event place. But it was like in an industrial area. It was up some stairs. It actually looked like a bit of a red light type situation, especially with me standing at the front. I looked like the madam. But unless you knew the place was an event place, you wouldn't have thought that that's where we were going. That's it. That's how much it was. It was. We didn't let anybody know where it was. I didn't even know where it was until I got there, until I got to the station. And then somebody came around to get me. Right. That's how cloak and dagger it was.
Right. Well, with our original red pill screening, we actually implied, we had a meetup point, and we implied that we'd then drive people from that location to the other location, but it was actually walking distance. So a few people were ready to jump in a car, but we talked them over to the new location. But yes, we did the same sort of thing. I believe that was John Lambert's idea, actually, who's just posted. So that was our red pill screening. That was the third one in Australia. Yeah, that process is now used all around the world by MRAs, and others have done that.
But it's scary. We shouldn't have to do this. I can remember when it originally got cancelled, it was on Studio 10 with Jessica Rowe, and Jessica Rowe was like, no, it's misogynist and it's patriarchy and they should cancel it. And the guy presenter, Joe Hildebrand, I think, was actually the one saying, what these people are saying is it could be 100% true, but what these people are saying is no one's even seen it in Australia. So how can you say it's misogynist and it's patriarchy? Because you haven't seen it. So you're cancelling something you haven't seen.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you think you can destroy my argument, go right ahead. I don't mind that at all. What I have a problem with is censorship. But if you think that there are flawed arguments in that documentary or in anything I've written, go right ahead and tell me.
Well, it was on that whole panel on Studio 10, and it's on YouTube. On that whole panel, it was only the staunch feminist Jessica Rowe that was against the screening of it. And it was only because of comments that she saw from other staunch feminists. Yeah. It wasn't anybody saying, I've seen it as a feminist and it's actually got a few good points. It was all these staunch feminists that hadn't seen it.
Have you seen it yet, Not? The Red Pill documentary?
Oh, of course, I own it.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent. Good choice.
It's part of my training library. Yeah.
Very good. Yes. So there we are.
I actually wasn't awake at the time when it came out. I was still thinking that, surely if I get to that area, in terms of accusations or family breakdown or whatever, then the justice system sort of works. Well, I've realised that that's not exactly right.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It is. Oh my God! And it's, as I say, I don't regret it. I've loved this journey. I think it's been amazing and so eye-opening to how the world really is. But parts of it have been immensely scary when you think, oh my God, I've been listening to some type of blackmail narrative that is so false. Like even today, I put a comment up saying that it's more than 51% of female victims of domestic violence are at the hands of a same-sex partner. And somebody came on and said, "God, you can't even get your correction right because it's 41%." And it was like, I'm not even going to argue with you because you're just going to pull me down to your level. I'm not going to go there. It was on the weekend where somebody said, what's something that you're against? Name something that you believe in that is unpopular. And I said, modern feminism. And somebody came in and said, what's modern feminism? I said, perfect example is look up Clementine Ford. And they turned and said, oh, I love her. So I took the famous Twitter screenshot of kill all men and all men are rapists. And they even argued saying, yeah, but imagine the trash she gets. And it was like, I'm not going to argue with you. We're just going to agree to disagree because I can slam you every part of the way with facts and figures and how she's bullied people, how she bullied those boys in that high school where the girls walked out.
Yes, for those who don't know, Clementine Ford a couple of years ago did a presentation to a school in Sydney, I think it was, and she wouldn't take questions from the boys, and reportedly a significant proportion of the girls in the hall staged a walkout.
And there was even. Sorry, go ahead.
It just goes to show, though, how kowtowed the boys are now and how afraid they are that they weren't the ones who did the walkout. It's the girls.
Yeah, but there was even, she said something once, because she's always one, and I've seen her several times say it, we want men to speak up. If they're victims of anything like this, we want men to speak up. And then I saw another interview with her where she stands there and she goes, the bad thing about being the mother of a son, it's always wah, 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 wah. And men, it's always wah, 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 wah. And it's like, you're telling men to speak up, and as soon as they do, you're mocking them.
Yep, that's right. So Clementine originally was not going to reveal the gender of her baby. It was actually a journalist that accidentally spilled the beans. And so after that, she has admitted she had a boy. But initially, for at least a month or two or so, she was refusing to say whether she had a boy or a girl.
But there's feminists out there, and I've seen it, where they have said if they find out they're having a boy, they're aborting it.
Yeah, that's right. Quite a number have said that, actually. That's right.
It's and like, how can you abort a child because of gender? How immoral, how sexist, how you're killing a child because, not because it's got some type of major birth defect where it's not going to live for so many days, or not because of some major health, or not even because you just don't want to have children. You're aborting a child because of its gender. That's going back to the Chinese back in the 80s, where it was a one-child policy and everybody was putting the girl children up for adoption. Now we'll look at where China is. They're all looking for wives for the boys.
Yeah, that's right. And because it's boys happening in the West, there just isn't the outrage. That's right. That reminds me of Sarah Silverman, actually. She did a Super Bowl commercial, and then during the Super Bowl commercial, she was pretending to deliver a baby, and she said, I'm sorry, it's a boy. And so now I call her Sarah, I'm sorry, it's a boy, Silverman. And it's interesting, though, she's stepping out against cancel culture now. So there have been a few people who previously would have appeared were strong supporters of it and now trying to stand up. But I think perhaps it's a little too late for them to be coming on board now with this. Should have been doing it years ago.
Well, we've got it. We're going to talk. We have discussed this. Rob and I have discussed this. We are going to have a full episode when it comes to cancel culture, because I'm sure that we can name about 20 things that they've cancelled, but it's also things that, and I've seen in stupid things on Facebook where it's like things that TV shows did in the 80s and 90s that they can't do today, and it's including Friends episodes and Married with Children. It's like, why can't we do it today? we can say the C word on TV, we can say the F word on major TV shows, and we can show all forms of body parts that we couldn't show in the 80s and 90s, but we can't. They're cancelling things out because it's going to be offensive.
Well,
to people.
That's selective. I recently saw an article about it was a midday show laughing about a woman cutting off a man's penis. So cancelling, but only some things.
Yeah,
because it's offensive to only some people.
Yeah, it suits the woke narrative.
That's right. That was The View, I believe, and that would have been, or it was quite a way back now, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, maybe not quite that far. Now, I'm not great on celebrities, but I'm trying to think of the name of Holly Robinson was there that day, but there were a few other people who were. I've forgotten the name of the lady who actually said it. Does anyone remember her name?
Is she? You talking about The View?
Yes, when she talked when a woman had severed her husband's penis because he was going to leave her, and she mutilated it by putting it down the garbage disposal, so it couldn't be reattached. There was another case recently, by the way, in Taiwan, just happened last week, where a woman cut off her boyfriend's penis and flushed it down the toilet so it couldn't be reattached. So in the last 10 years or so, mostly when they mutilate men in that manner, they get rid of the penis as well, so it can't be reattached.
Okay, are you talking about Joy Behar? Might have said it.
No, but I'm having a blank at the moment, but we'll definitely, I'll write that down below in the comments.
It wouldn't have been Whoopi Goldberg, because...
No, she was there though. Was there in that episode?
Yeah. I've seen Whoopi Goldberg when they've talked about a woman hitting a man, and then a man lashing out and hitting her back, and everybody's been against Whoopi, and she's going, if you lay a hand on someone, expect to get hit back. Someone's always going to be the stronger person in a fight, whether it's male on male or female on female or male on female together, or non-binary, whatever floats your boat. But it's somebody's always going to be the stronger person in the fight, and if I get hit, it's like literally going to be 2 hits. You hit me, I hit you, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Actually 3, because the joke goes, you hit me, I hit you, you hit the floor.
No. John Lambert has said Catherine Becker, but I don't think that's correct either. I'm having a complete mental blank on this person's name, but that's okay. We'll definitely look it up. But yeah, so that was a fairly. She did apologise, sort of, for that, by the way. She made a very begrudging apology a couple of weeks later. The most extreme cases of misinjury are usually called out, but there's usually a very, very sort of lukewarm apology out of it. We saw the same thing at the apology.
The one person I have not seen apologise, and she has to. It's been too long now. Was Shirley Moody, after she made that disgusting comment about our firefighters during Australia's worst firefighting fights fires they were fighting in modern history.
Yeah. Certainly in the last few years, absolutely. And yes, you're right. She hasn't apologised for that. I for one would love to hear her apologise. So if she wants to apologise,
I'd love for her to apologise, but it's too little, too late. She's a dog.
Yeah, I would really like to hear that. Actually, I think we might be. Don't hold your breath. You might pass out if you do that. But I would very much love to hear her apologise.
Put it this way: I'll shave my head the day she apologises.
Okay, fair enough. You heard it here first. There we go.
And trust me, I've got hair.
I think those locks are safe. Those locks are safe. Yes.
I will shave my head the day she's got to mean it. It can't just be, I want to apologise so that fat bitch shaves her head. I want it to be a real apology.
So if you get a chance, watch that video again where Shirley Moody says that, and then but watch Larissa Waters, who was standing next to her.
You just see her like this.
Yeah, Larissa Waters just sort of, I don't know how she managed to do it without moving her leg. She just physically backed off. So
you physically saw it. It was like, oh, I'm going to have nothing to do with this one.
She's smart enough to realise that was going to hit the fan. So unlike Shirley Moody. So at least Larissa Waters was able to realise that. I don't necessarily have a particularly high opinion of her, to be quite honest, but at least she was smart enough to realise a little. She's a politician, so she was able to see what was going to happen.
She still uses the Red Heart campaign to give the false narrative of her statistics when it comes to female victims of domestic violence.
Now, gosh, I'm having a good night from my memory. So, DVAA, Domestic Violence
Awareness Australia.
Thank you. Awareness. Thank you. I was having such. Thank you. Domestic Violence Awareness Australia keeps good data on people who have died as a result of intimate partner violence in Australia, men, women, and children. If you want a reliable source of information, go to DVAA. They're on Facebook, and I think they also have a website. But mostly, most of the information is posted on Facebook. Every time there's something happens, they update the information and they post out. But they have a spreadsheet where they maintain all this information. So that's where to go for reliable information.
Now, I won't give credit. I will say this about the Red Heart campaign. The numbers they put up are correct, but it's of people that have died due to violence.
That's right, exactly.
Not domestic violence, but Larissa Waters uses those numbers and then she sort of tags on that she doesn't tag on that it's domestic violence, but she uses the narrative to make people believe it's about domestic violence.
It's implied, exactly. Now, this used to be worse.
It's not necessarily in Australia, though. No. I do remember reading
there was one a few years ago. Yeah, there was with Larissa Waters and the Red Heart campaign. There was one 2 years ago, around Easter time, where there was a massacre in another country of some type of suicide bomber, and a Australian Muslim woman and her child got killed, and that was used in their statistics. So this is what DVAA give the correct statistics for domestic violence.
That's right.
The Red Heart campaign still gives correct statistics, but to Australian victims, don't necessarily have to be in Australia, to Australian victims of all violence.
Yep.
Of all violence.
So they actually used to be worse on this. So about 6 or 7 years ago, they used to come very close to claiming that they were domestic violence deaths. I think they may have even claimed it on the website at one point, but they were called out on this by people on our side. And it was since then they will actually admit that it's all violence, but they continue to imply that it is domestic violence. Yeah. And as you suggest, other people then take that data. And I've personally talked to many, many people who honestly believe those are deaths as a result of intimate partner violence.
Yeah, and then when
of course, and then they can say we need to stop violence against women.
That's right. So the Queensland government at the moment is investigating coercive control in relationships. Now, I haven't had a chance to investigate this myself, but I'm told by several reliable sources that only women can submit narratives or submit reports to this investigation. So, of course, that's all they're going to find is a bunch of women who are under coercive control of men. So even though there's research that suggests actually women are more likely to use coercive control in relationships than men.
I've been working quite extensively on that. I've written to the Attorney General offering my experience of coercive control, 14 years of it. I've also been in communication with somebody else who has also written and lodged an offer. I haven't received any response back. As a result of that, I've said, well, it's not surprising that the Minister for Justice and Attorney General who happens to be the Minister for Women, is attempting to co-opt the legal system here, which there used to be a pretense that the legal system was apparently unbiased, but that pretense has been dropped now.
Yeah, I agree. They're not even bothering to pretend anymore. Absolutely.
Now, before we go, because we did want to keep it a short night, but Rob and I did talk about, we are going to talk about really, really quickly, or just bring up the name of Naomi Wolf.
Oh, yes. Okay. So before the episode started, I was just telling a story to Natalie she hadn't heard, and I thought others might be interested to know about this. So Naomi Wolf is a fairly well-known, in fact, a very well-known feminist. She's been a prominent feminist for many, many decades. So she wrote a book, and it was a couple of years ago, and it was going to be, it actually was about to be published, and she was on a radio interview with the BBC. And the radio interviewer destroyed the premise of the book during the interview. So she was arguing that there'd been a lot of executions in the 18th century in England, whereas most historians were maintaining that there had not been that many. And she found a whole lot of cases where a whole lot of judgments where the final judgment was death recorded. And she'd gone away and said, okay, well, that means they've been executed. And there's an execution here, and another one here, another one here, and counted them all up, right? Turns out, as the interviewer pointed out to her, death recorded at the time was a legal term which actually meant they'd commuted the sentence. So none of these people had actually died. They'd actually had their sentence commuted. So Naomi Wolf had actually, they were about to release the book. I think they may have pulped the lot. So the entire book was based on this false premise because she hadn't done even a modicum of research. I mean, she's a feminist. I was really surprised.
Well, with the subject today of being hypo agency, I do what I always do, and it's like cramming for an exam. Yeah, the night before you've got to take the exam at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I YouTubed it, and a panel discussion with her and Karen Staunch, who is like my girl crush, came up, and I watched it because it was a good 51 minutes. I thought that's good. It gave me time to watch it and understand what's going on. And Naomi was talking, and Karen interrupted her. And Naomi said, "Can I just finish saying what I'm saying?" And Karen said, "Yeah, by all means, go ahead." So Naomi continued to talk, and then Karen came in with her point of view on where she wanted to correct what Naomi was saying. And then throughout the rest of the 45 minutes, let's say, it could have been 40 minutes of the panel discussion, every time Karen opened her mouth, Naomi interrupted her and talked over the top of her and contradicted her all the way through with all due respect. And it's like
woman-splaining.
Yeah.
Let's just say man-interrupting. Yeah. She was man-interrupting her.
Yeah, and it was just, I'm sitting there and I'm going, Karen was talking about, and we discussed this when we had James on the show, and James and I discussed it when we did the one-off podcast that I'm still going to do odd little bits here and there, and I said, when it comes to custody of children, the judge should go in thinking 50%, and then depending on where the family structure is, either take away or go, okay, this actually works at 50-50. Now, Karen, I've never seen this before until today. Karen believed the same way that it should be set out like this. And Naomi said, but it is. And it's like, it's not.
Yeah. No, in Australia, it's supposed to be like that, but we can see from the many, many cases where men are just deprived of access to their children, that's clearly not the case. There's an old doctrine in English law called the tender years doctrine, and that meant to basically, originally the argument is fathers going back a few hundred years would have primary control of their children in the case of a divorce, which was fairly rare, and that was because they were principally the ones who were thought to have the most money and be able to keep care for the children.
Yeah.
Right, so eventually this concept called the tender years doctrine came in, which said that children were best off with their mothers when they're up to about 5, was the argument. Now, the 10 years doctrine was used in Australia officially up until the 1970s, mid-1970s or something like that. It's supposed to have been abolished in Australian law, but if you look at the way the courts address these issues, it's very clear it's still there.
Yeah.
Even
And
supposed to have been there for 40 years.
the one thing that I find really interesting, and I do believe you should go into a court and it should be 50-50 and then discuss the family dynamic. But the one small thing that was about it is the men got custody of the children because they could financially support the child or children.
Going back hundreds of years.
Yeah. And then when it all changed and the women got the sole providership of the children, the men still had to pay because it was still in a time when women were still the main person at home and men were still, we're not talking about now where the nuclear families change where both parents work. We're talking about the 60s, 70s, some of the 80s where the family was still, the woman is a stay-at-home mum and the man goes out and earns a living. We're talking about that time where the woman got custody of the children and the man still paid.
Yeah. I'm just reminded of something because we've been talking about the historical aspect there. I'm a bit of a history geek, as some people know. So there's an interesting story I read actually not that long ago, actually, that in English law, it was pretty rare for people to have a divorce. In fact, at one stage, it required an act of parliament to get a divorce in England, right? And of course, that's where we get our legal system from. So only wealthy people could even have the influence to get a divorce. So poor people were out of luck. But they came up with a system called wife selling to actually deal with this. Now, what would happen is, and sometimes they'd even be a bit theatrical about it, a man and a woman, this is actually apparently quite common, a man and a woman have been married, they're pretty much sick of each other, maybe they have kids, maybe they don't, maybe they've made an arrangement. They decide to separate, right? But she wants to be with someone else. So the other guy would come up and he would actually pay a token amount to the husband, and then he would take the wife away, okay? And they would do it in public. And this was actually recognized within their village as basically a transference of the marriage. So she's now married to the other guy, and everyone in the village would act that way. This was apparently quite common. What's really interesting now is feminists have been coming out and saying, look, see, they used to sell wives in England, but the women were consenting to it. It was actually all about getting away from the guy they didn't want to be with and being with the guy they did want to be with. Interestingly enough, there aren't many cases that I could see of there being another woman involved. It was almost always the wife woman going to another man, and then she'd go off with him, and then he'd be free. I guess the other guy could then go and get married again.
This is a good one, again, that Karen brought up today, is she said back, before the 19th century, I'm sorry, I'm going to get the dates wrong, Karen, if my girl crush is watching this, A, I love you, and B, I'm really sorry if I got the dates wrong. But she was saying that if men were caught and convicted of spousal abuse, they'd get 20 floggings. Now, the reason why they never faced jail time or anything like that was simply because of they were the major breadwinner, and after the 20 floggings, they could still get up the next day and go to work. So the wife didn't miss out on anything. Yeah,
if you jailed a guy, you put a family on the street. Exactly.
Right. So nobody was missing out. You just got 20 lashes and on you go. Now, if you're a male victim in domestic violence, so the tables were turned, you got taken out in public. Now, I forgot what one was about, what one was, but she said there was 2 different things, and the second one was you had to sit on a donkey backwards and hold its tail. So as a perpetrator of domestic violence, you got 20 floggings. as a victim of domestic violence, you got humiliated.
Exactly. That's right.
Where's the patriarchy? And this is
Yeah.
going back over 100 years. Where's the patriarchy?
If we've got a patriarchy, it's a very dysfunctional one.
Yeah, but exactly. But see, it's like, where's the patriarchy when the man is a perpetrator and gets flogged, and rightly so? Anybody who commits domestic violence, I reckon, should be flogged. But where's the patriarchy when they're the victim?
That's
Why
right.
isn't a woman sitting on the back of an ass holding onto its tail?
So you're applying logic to ideological feminism.
So I have
that's actually my problem with feminism, is I do think logically.
Yeah. I have a hypothesis about domestic violence in the past, because feminists often claim that that domestic violence and intimate partner violence wasn't really addressed until recently. I don't think that's true. I think there was a period where we didn't address it very well. So I think that people who lived in villages, which was, let's face it, was almost everybody until a few hundred years ago, in a village, almost everybody knows everybody else. Now, the term wife beater in English is actually quite an old term, and it's got negative connotations, right? I think that particularly the men of villages dealt with wife beaters informally. So if a man was beating up his wife, the other men of the village would bring him back into line. Now, if a wife's being violent towards her husband, probably not much was done about that. I suspect what happened was, when we moved out of villages into cities and those personal relationships broke down, that's when we ended up with a situation where in the 70s and 80s, they would talk about a lot of domestic violence happening behind closed doors, because there was not that community. I suspect that really did happen in cities, but I think it was a relatively short period of time, maybe 100, 150 years. Most people lived in villages or small towns until quite recently, and I think people informally dealt with it, the communities. And by that I mean the men pulled the other man back into line.
Yeah, because there's no longer love thy neighbor. You hardly even know your neighbors.
That's right, exactly. And I think that's broken down that social aspect, and therefore we've ended up with the current domestic violence laws where the state has had to take on that responsibility. But I don't believe for a moment that through most of human history this was a behaviour that was tolerated. And by that I mean men assaulting women. I think when women assaulted their husbands, I think that was unfortunately tolerated historically.
It still is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's no, and this is. It started out, for me, it started off because of male victims of domestic violence. This whole tripping down the rabbit hole wasn't because I've said it before, it wasn't because I knew somebody, it wasn't any personal experience. It was just me being a smart ass one day, and I tripped down the rabbit hole, and I was like, oh crap, it's a lot worse than what my smart ass comment was before. But I think this is a majority of the reason why Rob and I do what we do. It's not just about male victims of domestic violence. It's about the whole concept of male issues that nobody wants to listen to, because it's like, what have men got to whinge about? They've got everything. What have white men got to whinge about? They've got everything. I'm sorry, they don't. It's because you think that. As soon as you think that, you're discrediting what you're saying, because as soon as you think that life's so much easier for white men because they've got all this lovely rose garden in front of them, you've discredited what you've said, because you do not know the issues they face.
Every year in the lead up to International Men's Day, we keep hearing, but every day is International Men's Day. In actual fact, the United Nations has 8 days for various categories of women and girls, and 0 days for various categories of men and boys. That's the official tally.
Yeah, but why do men need a day? Why do fathers need a day?
Every day is International Men's Day.
Like it wasn't that long ago. Well, it was about 3-4 years ago where they brought up Special Parents' Day on Father's Day instead of having Father's Day. And even Woolworths brought out the cake. And there was a tiny, tiny uproar about it. Then a couple of years later, a preschool said something about it for Mother's Day. And it was all over the freaking news. And it was like, how dare they take away? And I'm going, where were you people when they were talking about taking away from fathers?
Yep.
But
Care factor 0.
yeah, not right. I apply logic. And when people don't apply logic, it pisses me off. And that's when I go nuts and I swear a lot. And it just doesn't work. I turn into a trucker.
We should have an episode on and I have to get my air quotes ready. We should have an episode on the wage gap. I just thought of that while we were talking because I could think of some wage gap examples, but I think they'd be better off in an episode about the
forward to that.
And I will tell you about the letters that I have written to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency and the responses that I've got, which I have published with their permission. So I've spoken to them more than once, but I once wrote them an open letter, and I asked permission to publish their response. I was granted permission to publish their response on the proviso that I published it in its entirety, which I would have done anyway, but I did. And I think we should talk about that. It's such a fun subject.
Well, so we've got cancel culture coming up. We've got the wage gap coming up. Look, if any of you guys out there, guys or girls, I don't care who, I'm non-binary. I'm not sexist. Yeah, if you guys want to join us talking one night, like Not did tonight, get in contact with me. Get in contact with the Tackle Box page. Get in contact with Rob. By all means, anybody and everybody is welcome, as long as it's respectful. The only person that's not allowed to be respectful is myself, because I'm going through menopause and I'm a bitch.
Quite right. And you're right as a woman.
Yeah, I've got more rights than you.
Hypo agency. Thank you very much for coming on, and you're doing some fantastic work there. So please do keep up the good work and keep the bastards honest, or try to.
Oh yes.
Yeah, good luck. Now, before we do go and I do all the algorithm crap, in the group chat here, so it'll come up on the Facebook chat, or the Facebook post, is I'll put up the Naomi Wolf and Karen Storm panel interview, because I did find it very, very, very interesting.
Yes, I'd like to see. I have seen it, but I'd like to see it again.
Okay, so again, before we say goodnight, click like, hit subscribe. We've got to get this out there. This is not about popularity. This is not about getting working within the YouTube algorithm. It's about getting the truth out there.
Yep.
Okay, so it's good night from me.
Good night from me.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Night.